Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's build video, I have something a little bit different. Now, as an artist, I'm constantly trying out new mediums to expand my creativity, and recently I've been trying to teach myself some 3D modeling on an app on my iPad called Nomad. Basically, it's a simplified version of ZBrush, and using an Apple Pencil, it's extremely intuitive to drawing. So since I went to school for illustration, this program was fairly simple for me to pick up. In fact, I made this double-headed snowman monster in just a couple of hours playing around. Now, the other thing that's cool about the program is then you can take that model, export it as an STL, and print it off. And in fact, if you would like to print off your own version of this model, I have free STL over on my website that you can download. I have a link down in the description. Now, I love art toys and miniatures, and I would love to incorporate more things like this into my workflow. In fact, hint, hint, I might just have a little Expedition 33 figure in the works. So if things like this interest you, feel free to subscribe and follow along. I want to try to put out some more free STLs and then show people how to paint it, how to finish it off. And in fact, with the snowman, I didn't just paint it. I also added some snow scenery flock to really give it a unique look. So I want to show you what it takes to bring Frosty to life. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, I'm by means no expert, but if you're wanting some tutorials on Nomad, check out Dave Reed on YouTube. He's got lots of videos. I exported the STL over to my Bambu H2S. The original file was designed to be a miniature, so in Bambu Studio I scaled the model up over 400%. And of course you can print him out of whatever size that you would like. Mine ended up being approximately 7.5 inches from the base to the top of his hat. After about half a day the print was complete and I could take it up to the shop and remove all the supports. I ornated the model to specifically get layer lines on his wooden arms. I thought it'd be a cool extra texture, so I want to mask these off. But for the main bulk of the body I'm going to be using some 2-in-1 filler primer. Now when it comes to sanding, I'm not going to go crazy because I'm going to cover most of the body with snow scenery flock. But I do want to make sure that the hat and the scarf are pretty smooth, so I'm going to be using a combo of Bondo, glazing putty, and acetone. This is going to thin the Bondo and make it easier to apply to the surface just using a sponge. Now I will say that the Bambu does a pretty good job with layers, so not a lot of filler is needed. Mostly on overhang areas like the back of his hat and his butt. For those areas after the first layer of the combo had dried, I took just the Bondo and applied it with the makeup sponge. This allowed me to apply a thicker application to those areas that needed a little more work. After the putty had cured, I could then go in with some 300 grit sandpaper and start to refine the surface. The Bondo sands really well, so I'm not needing to apply a ton of force. And because the hat and scarf are pretty important, I even went in and did some wet sanding on these pieces. That's the good and the bad of 3D printing. The printing goes fast, but it's all the cleanup steps after production. With the model sanded, I can now apply some paint and primer flat white. This gives a nice bright base tone for hand painting acrylics. And the first color I'm going to use is some Liquitex Heavy Body Burnt Sienna. This pigment is heavily watered and applied to the arms, making sure that it runs down into all of the details. Adding the paint this way also helps accentuate the print layer lines. I'm going for more of a cartoony look for this paint job, but feel free to get creative and make this snowman unique to you. After the wash had dried, I could then apply a dry brush of the burnt sienna directly to the arms. Notice I'm not covering the entire surface because I want some variation in the paint. As a final highlight, I added some Liquitex unbleached titanium to the burnt sienna. This is also going to be dry brushed onto the arms, and make note that I'm not adding any water to this pigment. That could cause the paint to run down into the details and make it look flat. For the scarf and the ribbon on his hat, I'm going to be using some Liquitex Heavy Body Cadmium-Free Red Medium. Now one thing to note is that this color is extremely opaque. So I'm being careful and making sure not to get it on any of the parts that are white, because it's not going to come off and those mistakes are definitely going to have to be repainted. But it's a small price to pay when the paint covers this well. The same principle goes with the Liquitex Mars Black, and as you can tell I'm very careful lining and then filling in those areas with a detail brush. Now I'm not going to lie, when it came down to the eyes and the coal, I switched over to some magnifiers that I use to paint miniatures. For the carrots, I'm going to be using some Liquitex cadmium-free orange. Just like the red, this is a very opaque paint, so once again, magnifiers and painting as careful as I can. Of course, you could stop here because this model looks great, but I'm going to take it a step further and add some Woodland Scenics terrain snow. For this process, I just need some basic PVA glue and a little bit of water to mix up a slurry. This is then going to be brushed onto all of the areas on the snowman that are white. Then I could take some of the snow and sprinkle it onto the surface, removing any excess. The glue and the water allow the snow to stick to the surface without issue. But you can see why it's important to paint the figure white first. Just in case I miss any spots, it's not going to be noticeable. Now I will say this is kind of a messy process, so make sure to have some paper down to collect all the excess snow so you can dump it back into the bottle. But in my opinion, it is worth it because this surface looks so much cooler than if it was just painted white. When applying the snow to the lower half of the snowman, notice that I'm grabbing onto the hat. It was not intentional, but it ended up being a great spot to handle this piece. Before the glue and the snow had a chance to completely dry, I did go in with some brushes and remove excess material from the scarf and from his eyes. Now the white does look good, but I think I can make it look even better by using some Army Painter Speed Paint Plasmatic Bolt. This was thinned just a little bit so that it wouldn't be quite so bold. This paint could then be applied through the airbrush to the base of the snowman as well as the crease at the midsection. Here I'm trying to pick out shadowed areas, so that's also going to include his eyes, cheeks, and of course his mouth. But that little bit of blue really makes the highlights on the white pop. And even though it wasn't intentional, I think parts of my childhood subconsciously crept into this design. But overall, I'll say that I'm really happy with the way this project turned out, and he looks great sitting on my mantle in time for the holidays. So hopefully y'all enjoyed this tutorial and the free STL. And if you are printing one of these off, be sure to tag me on Twitter and Instagram. And like I'd mentioned in the beginning, I hope to do more of this because as an artist, you got to do what you love. And one of the things that I love doing is teaching other people my tips and techniques.